Okay, good morning everyone, and thank you very much for attending our webinar on financial autonomy. This morning's webinar is a joint effort by the National Safeguarding Office with the Disability Umbrella Group's Safeguarding Reference Group. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Mahon. I'm a Principal Social Worker with the HSE National Safeguarding Office. We have three excellent speakers this morning, Joanne Condon, Aileen Morrissey and Nicola Hardy, and we shall be joined by Joanne Haffey from the HSE's National Office for Human Rights and Equality Policy for the panel discussion after our speakers have presented. Just to let you all know, our webinar is being recorded, and we would ask that if you have questions, you would put them in the question and answers facility, which is located at the bottom of your screen. And we will be collecting all of the questions for later on in the webinar. Excuse me. Our first speaker is Joanne Condon from the National Advocacy Service. Joanne is the National Manager of the National Advocacy Service, and she has worked with NAS since 2014, working as a regional manager with the service until 2022. She has 25 years experience in a variety of roles across the health, social care and advocacy sector. Joanne has a particular interest in advocacy practice, human rights and policy development, and is passionate about supporting people to have their voices heard and their rights upheld. She also has a keen interest in supported decision making and has written and presented on this topic extensively. Joanne is a member of the National Disability Consultative Committee, a member of the National Care Experience Programme Steering Group, a member of the HSE's Assistant Decision Making Implementation Steering Group, and also sits on the Department of Health's Protection of Liberty Safeguards Legislation Expert Advisory Panel. Joanne is one of the founding members of the Our Rights and Medication Advocacy Group, hosted by Social Health and Education. This is a project aimed at providing resources to ensure people with disabilities are supported to understand their rights in relation to healthcare and medication. Joanne holds a degree in social science and a master's in youth and community work, a diploma in leadership, an award in managing people, a QQI Level 6 Special Purpose Award in Training and Development, and a QQI Level 7 qualification in patient safety complaints advocacy, and still found time this morning to come and present to us. So we're very grateful to you, Joanne. Joanne, I'm going to turn off my camera and I'm going to hand over to you, Joanne Condon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sarah, for that very thorough introduction. It's always hard to recognise yourself when you hear people giving such elaborate welcomes, but I'm absolutely delighted to have an opportunity this morning to contribute to this really important webinar on financial autonomy. And this is a topic that's very close to our heart in the National Advocacy Service, because last year we undertook extensive piece of work to produce a report titled Shortchanged: Barriers to Financial Autonomy for People with Disabilities in Ireland. And such was the concern that we had about the volume of work that we were undertaking to support people to overcome financial autonomy issues. So it's really a very, very important issue, particularly to support people with disabilities to gain equality and to be able to participate as full citizens. So in this morning's session, I'm going to give you a very, very brief, kind of a high-level summary of the key findings and recommendations of our report. And you can access the report itself on our website at advocacy.ie, along with some of the other resources that I will be mentioning as I go through it. So it's a report that exposes the reality that financial autonomy is actually out of reach for many people in Ireland today. It's a report that sheds light on the sobering reality of many people's lived experiences. People like those who feature in our report, like Joe, a man in his mid-50s who could not afford to go out with friends for a social evening and couldn't afford to buy tickets for a local match because his family managed his money. Or John, who wanted to be able to buy his own clothes as a grown man, rather than what his mother was purchasing for him and dropping to him. But he was not able to because he had no access to his own money. Or Rita, who had no awareness of what money she had because a family member was blocking and controlling all access to their joint bank account. Or Jack, whose only choice to have a bank account was to have a joint account with a family member. For the vast majority of all of us on this call today, financial autonomy is something that we take for granted. We don't think twice about it. Yet in 2022, 14% of all of our advocacy work at the National Advocacy Service related to financial issues. And this was 13% in 2024 and 12% in 2022. So between 12 and 14% of our advocacy casework over the last 2 years has really concentrated on many people who do not have financial autonomy. This report is chiefly concerned with the lived experience of people with disabilities, and we very purposefully chose to examine the issue through the lens of a rights-based approach. This recognises disabled people as rights holders, as citizens with rights who should have the same freedom to exercise financial autonomy as the next person. We purposely avoided an approach that sought to place the safety and protection of people above all else, or purely to frame it as an economic issue, as opposed to an issue of dignity, human rights and equality that considers the biggest risk of all to be the devastating impact to a person's quality of life, autonomy and personhood when their financial autonomy is restricted. So the report is based on a number of other pieces of work that we have jointly been involved with in the backdrop to the writing of this report. First and foremost, our one-to-one advocacy work with all of the individuals that we support on a daily basis. Second of all, we produce a casebook once a year, and again, you can access that on our website. And in 2023, we chose to spotlight the issue of finances to go with the focus on this topic in that year. We also wanted to produce a very practical resource to put in people's hands because in our experience, many people with disabilities simply don't understand what their rights are. So alongside the social policy paper, we also produced an easy to read guide called My Money, My Rights, My Options, which simply informs people of their rights. And again, I would encourage you to access this and to use it if you are supporting people who are unaware of their rights. We also presented to the Consumer Advisory Group of the Central Bank. Based on the experiences of those we support, they were very keen to hear the barriers that people are experiencing to inform their work. And that was an excellent opportunity to bring the voice and lived experience of those that we support to a decision-making table. We also participated in a banking roundtable along with others who will be participating in this webinar, which was organised by the HSE Human Rights and Equality Office. And all of that culminated and formed the basis for the social policy paper that I'm now going to give you the key findings and recommendations of. So there were 5 key high-level findings. The first was discrimination on the grounds of disability. And we found that just simply with people who had visual disabilities presenting at a bank in particular, they often were led through a different door, as it were. And they often had to reach thresholds that neither you nor I have ever been asked to do. For example, to prove their capacity in order to open a bank account. I've certainly never been asked to prove my capacity to open a bank account or to get a statement or indeed to close an account or to move my money. Yet countless individuals that we support have experienced that. Also, we've had people who just simply based on the fact that maybe it's identifiable that they have a disability, have immediately been referred to the vulnerable customers unit in the bank and effectively being asked to walk through a different door than you or I. People have also experienced digital exclusion. And we all know there's been amazing progress in technology and it's made our lives much easier in many ways. But for, again, many of the cohort of people we support, those digital advancements haven't always been accessible, have not always been easy to navigate. And you will see many examples throughout our social policy paper of people who struggled to navigate those digital platforms. There's also a focus on people with disabilities as vulnerable customers, rather than seeing people as citizens with rights. And again, it's that idea of being asked to walk through a different door or potentially having to jump through more hoops simply because you have a disability. We have many, many stories of supporting people who are experiencing third-party control and restriction of their money. And some of this does relate to a historical backdrop in Ireland of people with disabilities being viewed as people who needed protection and minding and safeguarding. And that is a difficult legacy to break a culture from. We are moving into a rights-based era where people should be recognised as rights holders who should have the same ability to manage their money or manage their money with support as needed, or indeed to exercise their decision-making to the greatest degree possible. But for many people, that simply is not the case, with families maybe controlling money without their consent, restricting money without their consent, withholding statements, not, or placing barriers generally in their way to being able to manage their money effectively. And finally, we have experience of supporting many people who are experiencing financial abuse, where they have had money taken from their accounts, where they have had inheritance taken from them unrightfully. And, this has been obviously extensively reported on by the HSE Safeguarding Office as well within their own reports. So I'm going to give you just a flavour then of the recommendations from the report falling under each of those key categories. So the first area is financial services issues, and this relates to issues that people have really across financial institutions, some of those that I've mentioned already. So the first recommendation is training for staff in financial services on the Assisted Decision Making Act, because really the principles of the Assisted Decision Making Act, such as presumption of capacity or ensuring that people can, have all supports necessary before any more severe interventions, and proportionality, and all of these things really do act as safeguards to ensuring that people can exercise autonomy to the greatest degree possible. Also then consultation with people with disabilities in the design of new bank technology. Really, people have to be consulted with to make sure that the technology that is being used is fit for purpose for all citizens and all customers that are engaging with financial services. There needs to be regular reviews of accessibility by financial sector, looking at literature, websites and phone lines. So it isn't just the tech platforms like apps on phones, it's the whole lot. Information that's issued, websites and information that's on those, and equally people experiencing difficulties with all different communication platforms. A need to identify a range of identification formats. This is an issue that we came up against quite a lot, where people were restricted or encountered a barrier to financial autonomy because they typically didn't have the type of IDs that were required by financial services. And then finally, a change in the language used by financial services in how they refer to people with disabilities. Again, this is a human rights issue. It's about citizens with rights. We should all have the same access to services. We should not have to walk through different doors. And I think sometimes language is a powerful vehicle that can communicate. It can communicate values, it can communicate culture, and it can embed culture. So part of changing a culture is changing the language used, to use more empowering language that recognises people as rights holders. Moving then to the second area, which was third-party control of finances. A key recommendation that we identified was many people with disabilities have never been given the opportunity to build their financial capacity muscles. They've never had somebody sit down and go through the basics and teach them how to manage their money or to understand how much money they have. And this is absolutely critical if people are to exercise their financial autonomy. Organisations need to build awareness around people's financial rights. So organisations that interact with third parties should be raising awareness all of the time about the fact that citizens, irrespective of whether they have a disability or not, are entitled to manage their own money, to give consent in relation to what happens to it insofar as possible. The Department of Social Protection, there has been significant issues reported throughout our social policy paper with agent arrangements where it can go wrong. Of course, sometimes it goes right, but this has not been reviewed in some time. And one of the key recommendations is that it would be reviewed to take into consideration some of the difficulties and barriers that people are experiencing. Finally, the Health Act 2007. We would feel that there isn't enough detail to allow for a deeper dive into how people are being supported financially within perhaps residential settings. And if the regulations were to be reviewed, we would recommend that it does give a little bit more detail so that HICWA, for example, could have a little bit more autonomy to look at accountability around how people are being supported and how their personal plans can ensure that that is being maximised to the greatest degree possible. The third area then is responses to financial abuse of people with disabilities. So we would support many, many people to report safeguarding issues, to engage in safeguarding plans, to attend meetings with multidisciplinary teams. And some of these findings are based on those experiences. So the first thing that we recommended from our work was that legislation to underpin the work of safeguarding protection teams is badly needed in Ireland to give more teeth and to make a more robust system overall that is capable of really addressing when people are experiencing financial abuse. There are inconsistencies in our experience on the role of designated officers across services in Ireland. They operate slightly differently. Some are absolutely fantastic, others are still learning the ropes, and really we identified that that inconsistency can pose quite a lot of challenges for the people that we support. We do also recognise that the HSE safeguarding and protection teams need to be better resourced. We have experienced supporting people where there have been waiting lists in place, and it's just inconceivable, isn't it, to think that if you're experiencing, for example, financial abuse, that you would have to wait. So there is an urgent need to look at the resourcing to ensure that people can have very prompt responses when they're experiencing such things. We believe that independent advocacy should be a key priority and programme for government. Unfortunately, it wasn't. This was written prior to the most recent programme for government, but we are continuing our work to highlight the important role that advocacy plays in standing beside people. We are a person-led service. We do not take instruction from any other parties, and we're there to sort of be in the corner with the person and make sure their voice is heard, to give them information, to ensure they understand their rights, and just make sure that they can exercise their autonomy to the greatest degree possible. So for anybody who doesn't have natural supports, it really is a critical resource that people should be able to access. But sadly, again, there are waiting lists in certain counties, and there is a need for the government to think a little bit more about the future resourcing of advocacy. And finally, the independent oversight of structures and systems and practices in Ireland. Based on some of the experiences that we document in our report, we do see there would be a benefit for just that consistency to be achieved through independent oversight across all CHO areas. Then moving to the last to number 4 is managing finances in disability service settings. So quite a portion of our report talks about the type of financial autonomy barriers that people living in services can face. And one of our recommendations is that disability services could play a more proactive role in awareness raising campaigns. We often come across families who, hugely through ignorance, it's not out of malice, it's not out of wishing to restrict somebody's financial autonomy, but you know, if they've always been used to managing family members' money since they were a young child, perhaps they're unaware of the possibilities that exist, or again, the person's rights and how things have changed. And we really do believe that disability residential services, day services, really could play a very proactive role in supporting people's understanding of that. We believe there should be more staff training initiatives on supporting financial autonomy across disability services. We believe that the healthcare regulations should be reviewed to give a greater focus on these issues, which I've mentioned already, and that services really should place more emphasis on individual plans, including financial support plans, to ensure that people are receiving robust support to build their financial capacity, build their skills to the greatest extent possible. And then finally, discrimination and equality issues. adherence to the Assisted Decision Making Act and the principles I've mentioned already really would address so many of the issues that people experience. If people, proportionality, for example, if people only receive the type of support they need as opposed to the highest level of involvement in their financial affairs, that would be great. If people were included and made sure that their will and preference was taken into account. All of these things get to the very heart of many of the issues that I'm describing. It sounds like a very simple answer, but it really is. It comes back to the guiding principles and putting those into practice. I'm not talking about necessarily the formal decision-making arrangements. I'm talking about just simply putting the principles into practice. And then financial institutions must adhere to the various pieces of legislation, Equal Status Act, so treating people equally, not differently because they have a disability, adhering to the Assisted Decision Making Act, and of course the public sector duty in relation to human rights. So I'm going to just finish by saying it's been a really important opportunity to take a deep dive into this issue, because in an Irish context, there is an absence of any research or writings on this area. I think it's really important today that we're having an opportunity to come together and focus again together on this, and the multidisciplinary collaboration and cooperation in relation to supporting people with their financial autonomy. I cannot overemphasize it. We've been so encouraged by the really positive engagement right across the finance, health and social care sector in response to our social policy paper. I know Aileen from Bank of Ireland is going to be speaking up next, and we really have been encouraged by Bank of Ireland's response to our paper and really just making very practical changes. We can't really change a culture and change and make it better for people without that absolute collaboration. And we do believe at the National Advocacy Service that considerable advances can be made on this issue. We trust that everybody that's taken time to join today's webinar, it signals your commitment to want to do the same. And we really look forward to seeing what we can all achieve if we continue to work together on this really important issue. Thank you very much.
Joanne, thank you so much for that. That was such an interesting presentation. And it's actually given me quite a lot of food for thought, particularly as somebody who delivers training to the designated officers. I was really struck by that need for a consistent approach across the services with the DOs. So I think that's something I'll take back to my own work and be thinking about how we can get the key messages out to that really important group of people. So thank you so much. Our next speaker is Aileen Morrissey. She's the Bank of Ireland's Financial Inclusion Manager. And Aileen is going to talk to us about safeguarding in financial services. Aileen has over 10 years experience in financial services across various roles in financial well-being, youth, and now financial inclusion. Aileen also holds a master's in psychotherapy, which I think is an enormous qualification to have in the banking and financial sector. So thank you so much, Aileen. I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and thanks to yourself and Colleen for inviting us on today, and for everyone who's joined the call. As Sarah mentioned, I'm Aileen Morrissey with the Bank of Ireland and a Financial Inclusion Manager. What I'm going to run through today is just kind of talking about the evolution of our language, what we've put in place in relation to our training for our colleagues within the bank, what we see is kind of going on with our customers, the decision making, unconscious bias when we look at kind of the training that we have in place, and what we now that it's very much moved from, I think, computer says no type of mentality, and the flexibility and the reality about what we need to be doing within the financial sector then as well, and where we can find supports for customers then also. So when we speak about moving away from the vulnerable customer, I attended the launch of the NAS report on the financial barriers, and it was a kind of a light bulb, like everything that they were saying is just, we should know this. We had started on a training for staff at that stage. It was kind of well developed, but a glaring thing within the room was about the language that we use and in around the especially vulnerable. I think kind of traditionally banks and regulators, they have used the term vulnerable customer to describe someone, due to their personal circumstance or characteristics is at harm. But the term vulnerable, it's so broad, it's suggestive, and and it might suggest that there's something that we need to deal with someone. It can lead to people making assumptions about what a customer can and cannot do, and potentially we could be restricting their rights as a result of doing that then as well. So customers, and this is anyone, may not see themselves as being vulnerable or appreciate being labelled in that way as well. So down to the NAS report as well, and dealing with Sarah and co, that it's just, and Joanne and them, it's just the consumer rights and our colleagues, that we're looking for more inclusive language then as well. So we really are trying to listen and to respond to that then as well. And we know that all people have a right to access their financial system and to make informed financial decisions. So instead of vulnerable customers, we're going to be focusing very much on delivering better customer outcomes by building a culture of financial inclusion and support for all our customers at the time then as well. So we're looking to internally change our policies and procedures to perfect this new language that we have, and that's coming from top down and bottom up then as well. So in some ways that we're looking to do that, we would have had what's known as a vulnerable customer unit. I know Joanne referred to it, and we've renamed that team to our extra help team. We've renamed all the internal training that would mention vulnerable customer anywhere on any documentation. We've changed that then as well. And within that, what we're trying to do is to really get into the mindset, of what we're trying to do here then as well. Evolving the language, which we know is hugely important then as well. Last year within Bank of Ireland, I suppose we launched 6 customer commitments, which, they set out what customers can kind of expect of us. And one of those commitments that we made was to state how we would provide, extra support for customers who need it, including, supporting them through really just kind of difficult times in their lives then as well. So we really do have, because, we've a societal responsibility in relation to, our reach across the geographies in Ireland then as well, and in which we operate. So we really need to think about what's happening for our customers and how we may be able to do that then as well. Knowing that some things, they may be short term, they may be long term, they may be temporary in nature then as well. And what we do is try and see the breadth and the complexity of what might be happening for our customers then as well. And these are needs that may change at any point in time then as well. What we need to try and do with our staff is to get them to understand what is it that a customer needs when they engage with us at that point in time. Is it that they just want a bit of extra support, that they want someone to speak to, or, that they need directly to be put through to, if, for example, say a bereavement unit or something like that then as well. What we want to do is to make sure that we're seeing the person in front of us and that we're dealing with what they're going through then as well. And then in relation to the training that we had started, but we did go back to the drawing board very much with this, and thank you so much to the National Advocacy Group as well, and Inclusion Ireland. We approached them after the report and asked them to come have a look and do a bit of review, so they gave up so much of their time and gave, I think, really good input on this and really change kind of the scope and the landscape of this. So we've developed this training. It's mandatory training for all our customers. So that's absolutely group wide, be, customer facing or not. And it's really important, and it's about, support is really about kind of ensuring that everyone has access to financial products, and to support, they need to use our services then as well. So the training is about trying to help us to understand how we can support our customers regardless of their personal characteristics or circumstance then as well. So every colleague, as I mentioned, in Bank of Ireland, whether it's customer facing or it's customer impacting, has a part to play in supporting our customers within then as well. And I guess the aim of this training that we developed was to help our colleagues kind of understand what financial inclusion and support means for our customers, and to be able to kind of equip them with the knowledge and the skills to really try and positively impact the customer experience. And then from there, so sometimes it's great where you can develop, a really good training. It's mandatory, people do it, and it's there, and it's kind of a one and done. So we just really didn't want that to be the case with this. It's too important, and it's something that we want to embed completely with our colleagues. So what we developed is what's known as an extra help toolkit. So the training, it's kind of a one and done, but we've developed this resource for our colleagues, and it's information on how to support for customers who need the extra help. It's information on supports we offer and how we would actually provide these supports. We put together all the types of different training, our inclusion and development team internally. They'd have great training. We've got our well-being from our human resources. So there was really good stuff happening all around the place, but we've put everything into one place to give colleagues, this really easy access, and then links to all external support at charities, advocacy groups and organisations then as well. So we believe that's really important, and it's something that we've put up. It's there, it's kind of the first range of it. So we want to be able to develop it, build on it, and that will be coming from getting feedback, and attending sessions like this, and like changing what's there. We've obviously linked out to the different reports and things like that come in, which we find hugely important in this space then as well. We have a induction course for all new colleagues when they come into the bank. So I suppose we just want to make sure that if I'm in a branch in Cork, if I'm in a contact centre in, Dublin, that a customer who's coming through, we're new, that we're speaking the same language and we're understanding things from the same mindset. So within that training of what we do with new people coming to branch, I do a section on financial inclusion and supports then as well. And we really want to try and make it clear about understanding decision-making capacity. We make it clear that every person has the right to make a decision. Some decisions are deemed wise and some are deemed unwise. We must always start by presuming that the customer has the capacity to make a decision. There is legislation to protect customers in relation to decision making as well. So we get our colleagues to fully understand the Assisted Decision Making Act, and it provides decision making supports to help customer make decisions about personal welfare, property and finances. And within that then as well, the guiding principles of what we go for every customer is that a person is presumed to have the capacity to make a decision. We should act to support decision making by taking practical steps to help the customer to make a decision. For example, on our behalf, we might be able to slow down our speech, asking the customer to repeat back information for clarity and to check understanding then as well. A customer absolutely has the right to make an unwise decision, and a decision or an intervention is only made for a person where it's deemed absolutely necessary then as well. A presumption of incapacity can result in really restricting their own financial products, their money, and to make their own decisions then as well. It can also lead to a loss in confidence in managing money as well. And remember that, we really try to advise our staff that, what is wise or unwise can always be subjective then as well, and that's not our place. The 4 pillars of decision-making capacity: has the customer the ability to be able to understand the decision, including the reasonable foreseeable consequence of each of the available choices? Are they able to retain the information long enough, even for a short period, to make a voluntary choice? To use or weigh that information to support, the process of making that decision then as well, and to be able to communicate their decision, and whether by talking, by writing, by using sign language, assistive technology, or any other means, or if the implementation of the decision requires the act of a third party, and that would only be legally then to be able to communicate that. And then I suppose with that, the posts, and with all our customers then as well, as long as the decision making capacity, that it's not fraudulent, it's legal, and that they're not under duress, that they're making the decision of their own free will then as well. We look at our customers, we ask our colleagues, and we ask them if they need to stop, pause, and engage if something doesn't feel right now. And this could be if it's to do with financial control. If we see someone kind of handing back their card to someone straight away when they take out a withdrawal, someone standing over their shoulder and things like that, that we need to try and give our staff the autonomy for them to feel that they can absolutely, step in a correct manner, and then that would be able to lead then to the autonomy then as well for customers to know that we're trying to do the right thing. We speak about unconscious bias. I think it's really good for our staff to be able to understand, we do try and support our customers brilliantly in their financial dealings with us then as well. We recognize that some customers, due to their personal circumstance, they may need a bit of extra support, a bit of extra help at a time with us throughout different stages, and then to try and get it right first time for these then as well. So trying to understand what unconscious bias, that it would refer to the automatic associations and reactions that arise when we encounter a person or group. We really do try and get people to understand what's going on for ourselves, so we're aware of that. So when we're dealing with people then, our customers in a face-to-face capacity, instead of kind of maintaining neutrality, that unconsciously what we might try and do is that we tend to associate positive or negative kind of stereotypes, or so positive or negative stereotypes with certain groups, and to let these biases influence our behavior then with them. So we just try and really get into the kind of the psychology around this then as well, to understand what we're doing, and that how important it is not to label people in any sort of way would lead to completely inappropriate and poor customer outcomes then as well. And it's that it's important for ourselves to encourage that, that we treat each other as colleagues, and for our customers and their needs as completely unique, and that we're dealing with the individual in front of us as well. And then that there is very exceptional circumstances that will happen across the board as well. So understanding, we do have a basic bank account, the all member banks as well. So why would we choose one? Like, why would someone think that they would choose a basic bank account over a personal current account? Really understanding that, and not just jumping to any sort of assumption in any sort of way. Joint accounts, and we a social and inclusion policy, then everyone does have a right to a bank account, and we do need to be able to look at things in a different way to perhaps what we would have done in the past, to make sure that we're meeting our customers' expectations then as well. Ensuring that if we are speaking to the customer who comes to us, that it's a customer-centric approach, and that's a relationship with them then as well. If a customer tells us, that they may, want someone coming with them, well, that's absolutely fine, but that we're speaking to the customer who's there in front of us then as well. We do offer, a range of kind of extra supports then as well, who may, and it's a range, experiencing a range of accessibility, safeguarding, or life events then as well. This list, it isn't exhaustive, but it's just some examples I thought that I'd use just for today to be able to show what's there. We've a global chat volunteer, so it's just, if someone speaks, a different language, are we able to support them with that? Our fraud supports for customers with accessibility is really important then as well, and I'll speak more on that just for the EAA that we have. We're able to translate any document into large text, audio file, braille, accessible PDF as well, and change it into any language then as well if needed. Supports for customers with language barriers as well. the Just a Minute card and Sunflower. We're going to be rolling those out in the next few weeks then as well. So all our branches will be jam and sunflower friendly, and we are delivering training on that at the moment, and we will be distributing the merchandise then as well to our branches. And with that, for the induction that I spoke about earlier, the new to bank, they do have a list of mandatory training that they have to do when they join, and we're looking to get that training added to that mandatory training then as well. So we're really trying to start from day one and building up that people understand what that is, that if someone comes in with it, that if we see the lanyard, we see the card, that we're able to react and treat that customer in the way that they wish to be treated then as well. We do have a resource just up on our group website. It's known as the Extra Help Hub. I suppose there's a range of different topics on that. So if people did want to get any information, there's a 6-chapter video then as well. So it kind of goes through, day-to-day banking accessibility and advice then for older persons then also. The European Accessible Act, which we have coming in. So I suppose I just wanted to talk through some of the aspects of that will be happening over the next few months. So when we talk about the digital accessibility, what we have is that we're looking to ensure that all our websites and that our apps are fully accessible to all customers. It will mean working with assistive technologies such as screen readers then as well. Apple Android, devices, they do have lots of inbuilt accessibility within them already, and customers may need to be able to use that then as well. And with the high color contrast, how it really benefits everyone, but particularly individuals with low vision, color blindness, or dyslexia then as well. We know that accessibility, it is a direct, input into autonomy and safeguarding as well. So I think it's just really important how we need to be continually working on that then as well. For the telephone, we're going to be looking at, we can't expect that all customers are able to use the phone. We really do need to try and find an alternative way to support them and what they need to do when they can't use the phone then as well. We'll be looking at bringing in a sign video, ITRS then as well. So its customers will be able to reach us using sign video, Irish Sign Language then as well, by an interpreter. So we'll have that up on our group website then as well over the next few weeks. So again, another important way just to be able to offer alternatives to our customers then as well. The Irish Text Relay Service then as well, they will now be able to accept calls made through ITRS as well, enabling people who are deaf, hard of hearing, speech impaired to make and to receive calls independently also. And the service enables the translation of text into voice and voice into text to facilitate that person being able to use it then as well. For our branch process sign video, so a customer who has hearing or vocal impairment then as well and uses sign language, if they present to the branch and need some assistance, that we'll be able to use the video remote interpreting also within the branches. And they'll be rolling out over the next few weeks also. And then for the customer communications, what we're going to be doing is that we can provide any of our comms in the following format, and this is something that we do have already. So Braille, large font, audio file, accessible, Excel, and color paper also. We can only do this, I suppose, it's on request for a specific document. So we're looking to be able to see how we can get that it's always on, that it's ticked, that it's always on someone, so they don't have to ask for it each time. But that's something that we are working on for that then as well. Simplifying our language as much as possible, which is a huge part of the mandatory training that we're doing, that we've rolled out to our staff to ensure communications can be understood, and that's by all of our customers. Communications, they should have a reading E-score of 60 and above and equal to a reading age of 12 to 16. And we adhere to the group style guide, and that has been updated to be in line with the EAA then also. our ATM and our physical devices also. So all of the new fleet of ATMs that will be rolled out are fully accessible, including features like headphone jacks and option to have high contrast screens also on those. So the new user interface, they'd have a touch screen, high contrast screen, increased font size, talking ATMs. So that would be triggered by inserting the headphones, a raise number 5 key to trigger kind of high color contrast, LED lights to guide the user, also braille label for core components, insert card, request receipt, and illuminated privacy wings and mirrors then as well for customers when they're using all of those. Information and support then as well. So new accessibility statement will be on our group website from the 28th of June this year also. And within that, it's going to set out the rules that we must follow to make sure that our customers are able to use our services and the products that we offer. And I will explain which of our services of these rules apply to and what are we doing to make those accessible then as well. And then just within that also, we need to be able to ensure of how customers are able to engage with customer complaints and reporting as well. So we'll be rolling that out. It's just an example of the high color contrast, the past, and perhaps what it would have looked like in the past then as well for customers. Within that then as well, I suppose I just I wanted to finish up just by talking about what Joanne said earlier, so about the collaborative approach with groups like yourselves, and how important it is, to be invited on here, how much we really do appreciate it, and how we do want to take action from it, going from the training, they were, going back, it was a lot in, but it was completely well worth scrapping and going again, Joanne, after being with yourselves, and the support and the insight that you gave us was crucial. We are always looking for feedback, and having all that accessibility, and the changes that you said coming, and I think it was mentioned as well about that's all well and good, but if people aren't given the opportunity to be able to understand it, we do work with different groups then as well. I was with, the Trinity Centre, people with intellectual disabilities during the week, where we had, a workshop within College Green, trying to talk about, financial autonomy, independence, looking at, some of the very basics, fraud, savings. We're working with a few other groups then as well, where we're trying to look at getting a module prepared, all in around financial literacy, and working with the groups to make sure that the module is at the developed specifically for them, for what they're looking for. We really want to focus on having a one door policy for all of our customers who come in. So no matter what, you come in one door, and if it's deemed that someone needs a bit of extra help or support, that we'll absolutely do our best to try and support them with that then as well. The ADMA training, that is part of our inductions and our overall training, and within the toolkit we have very specific, very easy to read guidelines of that. And I suppose what we always try and do now is that we don't jump to kind of the thing of having to safeguard the customer, that we're putting the customer there, and this whole thing of unwise and wise decisions as well, and the reporting, that we want that to be clear and concise for people to be able to engage with your branch. We do still have, there's 188 branches around the country, so for people to feel free, please, to go in and engage, and we'd be happy to work with groups in whatever way we can. There may still be old habits, within where a parent may have, always kind of held the card belonged to someone then as well, but the account is belonged to the individual, so it's really trying to maybe shift some of those old habits that people have. But I suppose we need to bring people along in an educational way that no, like, you know, that this is the account. If it's set up as a personal current account for that individual, that's the way. And you know, someone can't just kind of tap into it as often as possible. So look, engage, and it's up to us as well around that collaboration piece. And really happy to be here today. And thanks so much. I think I'll pass over.
Aileen, thank you so
Thank
very
you so
much.
much, Sarah.
It's
I'll stop
absolutely
sharing here.
sure. Thank you. That was absolutely great. And it's so positive to see the changes that are being made, and you know, how using a human rights lens, services can really adapt to the needs of customers, and such a range of supports has been, again, another eye opener for me. So I'm really grateful to you for sharing that information with us this morning. Thank you, Aileen.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Great. So our third speaker, before I go to our third speaker, Tim Hanley, our general manager, has reminded me to remind you guys, if you have questions, please can you use the questions and answers box. I was saying it was at the bottom of the screen, but it's actually on the top. So please do, because we will be having a panel discussion after our third speaker. So it would be lovely to see your questions in the questions and answers box available. Thank you. Okay, our third speaker this morning is Nicola Hardy, who I have had the great pleasure of working with previously. Nicola is an experienced clinician working in the field of disability support services. She has professional qualifications in community care, behaviour analysis, leadership, mental health awareness, trauma-informed care, and mediation and restorative practice. Nicola has worked for over 22 years in education, social care, and community support services. Nicola has worked for the Rehab Group as a behaviour analyst for the last 9 years, primarily supporting adults on the autism spectrum as they avail of day and residential support services. Nicola's work day to day focuses on creating supportive, person-centered and holistic support environments in which people are fully involved in selecting and working towards their personal goals via accessible information and tools. Nicola's professional interests are creating restriction-free environments, helping people to develop the skills they need to be more independent, and promoting quality of life for people with disabilities. In her spare time, which I'm sure there isn't much of, but in her spare time, Nicola likes walking, reading, photography, and spending time with her young family. But again, a busy woman who took time out this morning to talk to us. So thank you very much, Nicola. I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I just want to extend my gratitude for being given the opportunity to partake in what I believe to be a very important webinar. I wanted to talk today about growing financial autonomy, and obviously being a behavioural analyst, I look at that through the lens of a behavioural science approach. Sorry, now, little technical difficulty here. There we go. So this is just about providing some kind of a framework as to how I approached the work that I have done. I will be showcasing some of the work that has been done over the last 18 months in some of the services that I've been working in relation to growing financial capacity and financial autonomy. So obviously we know that a lot of our work is influenced at present by the Assisted Decision Making Act. At a glance, we know that it is a law that helps adults who may need support to make decisions about their life, their health, property, and their finances. The key principle is everyone has the right to make their own decision with help if needed. So who is the Act aimed towards? We know it's aimed towards adults with conditions like dementia, intellectual disability, brain injury, and mental health. The support options, as I'm sure everybody is aware, looks at decision-making assistant, a co-decision maker, and having a decision-making representative. So from a financial capacity perspective, financial autonomy, yes, the Act absolutely covers this, and it highlights a focus on managing money and property, using bank accounts, and signing contracts. So I obviously work for Rehab Care and as part of the Rehab Group, and there has been a long prioritisation of the promotion of autonomy. So a lot of the work of the clinical teams within rehab care, rehab group, have been to look at how we support people in relation to positive risk taking and the development of life skills, decision-making skills, and ultimately creating environments that support rather than restrict the individuals that we work with. So in terms of the Rehab Cares approach, the introduction of the Assisted Decision Making Act has provided a much needed legal framework that has amplified and legitimised the work, and it has really acted as a catalyst for greater consistency and clarity and momentum across our service deliverance. As an organisation, we remain incredibly committed to supporting individuals to build their financial capacity and having dignity and choice at the forefront of the work that we do. From a local perspective, so predominantly my work is based in the Longford area, and we've had a lot of discussions in relation to financial capacity and how to grow it. And this links very nicely with what Joanne was talking about in terms of the national advocacy findings. So the fourth point was managing finances in disability service settings. And there was a lot of areas highlighted that needed to be improved upon. And I think that it was a catalyst for us to having these conversations. We really asked ourselves, how can we support people within our services to grow their financial autonomy? And how can we begin to move from a restrictive practice model to a goal setting model of support? I think for anyone working directly in services, we can see the systems and the structures and the policies are changing. And we see that from the top down. The challenges that we have faced is how do we on the ground begin to action some of these things so we can begin to meet the policies and eventually at some point meet in the middle. So there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of work locally in the Longford area around these areas. Local reflections, really, we recognise that a lot of the people that we're supporting are, have experienced challenges with financial autonomy, and we can recognise that they have been associated with their disability. But what we've discovered is that it is incredibly important moving forward that we begin to consider the other contributing factors that influence people's financial awareness and financial skills. Such as systemic barriers, limited access to opportunities, that may also greatly impact their ability to take greater control over their financial lives. So in taking that and breaking that down, we began to look at what barriers we could influence, what barriers could we change and evolve from, what barriers could we overcome to support people to have better access and better understanding and to grow their financial autonomy. So the barriers to financial skill development can come from and be intensified by some of the following. So a lack of or limited practice opportunities. And I think this is something that a lot of people can recognise when supporting people in the disability services, and that historical practices have created a situation where people have had limited exposure practice opportunities around their finances. In addition, then we see targeting finance skills that have not been broken down into small enough components. So what we discovered is that when we asked a cohort of staff, what is the first thing that you would do when it comes to trying to teach somebody about finances? The majority of people answered that question by highlighting the need to teach finances in the traditional sense. So to be able to identify notes and coins, to be able to discuss kind of their incoming and their outgoings. So we found that was a really interesting outcome to have learned about, that the majority of people who are providing the support were unsure as to all of the necessary skills in order to teach people some element of financial autonomy. We also found having an unbalanced care versus support model of practice. This is a really interesting one, and I think of everything that I've learned over the last 2 years in this area and the work that I've been doing, this is the one that stands out the most from a practical perspective in terms of supporting staff to see the role in which we play. So we can either be contributing positively or inadvertently contributing in a way that actually hinders financial autonomy. So the care versus support model of practice is something that we have begun to do training in order to support direct frontline staff to be able to differentiate the two models. And whilst they can coexist safely and in line with the Assisted Decision Making Act, we need to be very careful as providers, service providers, that we're not solely running a care model of practice. Where we provide care, inadvertently, what we can create is a situation where we end up not providing people with the necessary opportunities to experience aspects of financial awareness. So it's a really, really important area that I think every provider needs to start looking at. And it's the one area that we've done a lot of training in at a local level to support staff to evolve their understanding of the two models of support and how they can coexist in a safe way and align with the Assisted Decision Making Act at the same time. Another factor that will play a role in a lot of services is having an unbalanced approach to risk assessment versus positive risk taking. That's historical practice where everything that we do and all the supports that we provide are put through the lens of risk assessment. But when you begin to widen that lens and you start looking at positive risk taking, skills building, it begins to provide an opportunity for us to see how the ADM aligns more effectively with positive risk taking and skills building, as opposed to solely looking at it through the lens of risk assessment. So it's really important when you're looking at financial autonomy to have a look at your risk assessment processes to ensure that they're not inadvertently creating an unintentional barrier. We know that a lot of staff are governed a lot by risk and risk management. So ensuring that policies lean heavy on the positive risk-taking side and skills building components will absolutely bring about a change in how people think about financial autonomy. We also found staff training and confidence, and it interlinks itself to the previous points, but that confidence piece. I think of all of the areas that we look at when we're supporting people, financial is it's a big area, and it's an area that can cause staff to become anxious and to feel, I think, worried, concerned about making mistakes or errors that result in a catastrophic consequence. So there is a lot of unsurety for staff and apprehension, and again that reflects itself, I think, really through the positive risk taking and organisations looking at policies to ensure the staff are supported to look at these things through the right lenses. A very long-standing barrier will be parental position, historical financial oversight. So not wanting organisationally or service-led wise, not wanting to rock the boat in terms of where a parent's position stands. And I think this is a very complex barrier, and it is laced in history and kind of that parental oversight. So there's a lot of work needed there in terms of bringing parents in on these conversations around the Assistive Decision Making Act, upskilling in supportive ways to facilitate parents to grow their understanding. We have had a lot of conversations with families in relation to the ADM, and we endeavour to continue that support so we can help people evolve from these historical positions. The other barriers we found is having an all or nothing perspective on financial awareness skills. And this is something we've seen bleed out in staff practice, but also in parental position. Either you can do everything or you can do nothing. And this is where, that perspective really misaligns itself with the Assistive Decision Making Act. Because what we're trying to do is grow a sense of financial awareness, to grow financial autonomy. We recognise that it is reflective to say that not everybody will get to a point of complete financial awareness where they can take complete control. but we equally recognize that there is potential for everybody to grow from not having a lot of awareness, a lot of opportunity, to increasing those experiences and then measuring the outcomes for that person. My role as a behaviour analyst in promoting financial autonomy, this is I think for me, it's an area of significant interest. And the Assisted Decision Making Act has been an incredible piece of legislation that has allowed a lot of behaviour analysts within rehab care to begin to utilise our other skills. I think behaviour analysts predominantly will be known for, supporting people with behavioural expressions of need, but there is another cohort of skills that we possess and hold, and a lot of that is around skills building and skills teaching. So the ADM and how rehab care have supported the clinical teams to look at it has allowed for a lot of really positive work to be carried out. So as a behaviour analyst, I support people with disabilities to build financial independence using evidence-based person-centred strategies. At the moment, my work focuses on breaking down financial goals into manageable steps that reflect each person's needs, their will and preferences. And this is delivered through practical real-world learning in everyday settings to support lasting and meaningful skill development. My philosophy is very simple in the work that I do, and I believe everyone can be supported to learn about their finances, but the approach must be tailored to their experiences, their needs, and the support level. It's not if someone can be involved, but how. And once I think you begin to change your mindset around the all or nothing, this process becomes a lot easier to open your mind up to. It really is about experience and opportunity in safe ways that will support a person to grow an element of financial autonomy. So at a local level, it was decided that we needed to start making some headway in relation to addressing the responsibility that we hold as providers of disability services to support people to begin to explore their financial autonomy, to open it up to conversation in order to facilitate people to come forward and support us in identifying the help they may need in that area. Historically, it isn't an area that we had looked at in such great detail. So over the last 18 months, it has really been a core focus. We made a decision to create a tailor-made programme to support those who are interested in developing greater skills in the area of financial autonomy. So in order to determine the interest, we created an expression of interest in an easy read format. Just to give people an insight and an overview as to what we were hoping to achieve. We also provided direct programme sampling where we supported people to attend a session where we sort of looked at finances in very easy, simple, gentle ways and provided people the opportunity to feedback if they wanted to return and learn more or if they wanted to step out at that point. And we also then outlined the goals of the skills building programme through easy reads and an opportunity for some people to explore the resources. They could see what we were hoping to achieve. They were able to interface and interact with those materials and were able to make a decision if it was something that they wanted to learn more about. We had 9 service users express an interest in looking at further skills building in relation to their financial autonomy. And from that point then, we carried out a skills assessment. The skills assessment was based on a couple of different areas. So money, which we all know and want, money management, which is the steps necessary to manage your own money, and basic safety skills. And that one, I think, for me, is probably the most interesting area, because sometimes when we look at financial autonomy, we look at it from the money side and forget about the safety awareness part and realizing that it is a core component to growing financial autonomy. So we carried out those assessments, and in order to achieve a greater understanding as to everyone's support needs, we did assessments that were a combination of role play, So creating kind of mock financial situations where we'd have to make decisions. And we also did some direct testing where we were out and about in the community like we always are. The fundamental differences is that I was there and looking at a person's sort of skill set in relation to interfacing with the wider world with money at the forefront of the interaction. And I also did a skills review, looking at the core skills related to money and money awareness in order to determine where people were at. From that process, I think what we was a fantastic insight was that we actually had two different groups of people. So the two groups we had, group one, identified as being capable but cautious. So these are individuals who have good cognitive functioning, historically, though, have not been given the chance to manage their own money. The decisions have often been made for them and not with them. And as a direct result of how they've been supported over the years, what we noticed was that there was increased sense of anxiety around finances and money, a sense of uncertainty when in the community, a sense of uncertainty when talking about it or having any kind of engagement about finances. And a sense of dependency on staff or family to make any sort of decision. And we found that from the smallest decision making to the more larger. And what we discovered is that the reliance was shaped by experience and not by ability. And that was a real takeaway piece for me in this process, to understand that it is our experiences that will influence our confidence, and it's not necessarily reflective of our actual ability. The second group that we identified were people who had complex support needs and have always historically been excluded. This is the group that I would sometimes believe are the hidden group of society, but they're the ones that need to be supported and heard probably the most. A lot of the support structures, policy changes are very positive and going in the right direction, but this cohort of the population are sometimes still being left behind. So it was very important that we created a support structure for people who fell into that grouping. So historically, this group was people who have more complex cognitive or communication support needs. So you're looking at a population of people who would have comorbid conditions, moderate to severe intellectual disability, alongside an autism diagnosis, and also people who would have been non-vocal in their communication strategies and needed additional support in those areas. These people have always been assumed to lack capacity in the past, and it is great that the Assistive Decision Making Act has changed the legislation and our policies around that, but there's still a lot of work to do in relation to changing attitudes in relation to that. And that's why this local work was so critical. Financial matters for this group have often been handled entirely without their involvement, meaning that they never were given the opportunity to even have a sense of awareness of money, of finances, let alone having any sense of involvement. This group rarely had the chance to learn about or engage with their own money, so the opportunity was taken away under the assumption that they lacked capacity. And they have had little to no experience in developing financial confidence or understanding. And again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. The experience is the fundamental piece of this. Without the experience and repeated consistent experience, we cannot truly tell where somebody's potential lies. So it became really important that we created a support structure for everybody, for both groups. And the fundamental aim was to increase the opportunities for people to interface and engage with their own finances in achievable and meaningful ways. There's a lot of strategies utilised to achieve this. Some of these things you may be aware of. Some of them, a lot will come from the behavioural science area. Visual supports is a huge tool to be utilizing, especially when it comes to financial support and supporting people to grow their financial autonomy. We devised a vast amount of visual strategies within the curriculum that was developed, but also within the day-to-day money guide. And I have a couple of examples that I can show you later on. They're nothing life-changing, but if you use them consistently, it is incredible the level of engagement that you can support people to engage with. We then had individualized resources, and that was all part of the learning curriculum. We used a lot of role play, so building people's confidence in using money, interfacing with wallets. We used everyday objects. We got a cash register, because a lot of this for Group 1 in particular was about confidence building. Again, going back to the very capable but extremely cautious. We did a lot of scenario worksheets where we supported people to go through possible scenarios and using the skills that we were targeting, how to problem solve their way out of that scenario. We used a lot of prompting, supporting people to grow their confidence by giving them the support they needed to achieve the outcome. Shaping and chaining, really just breaking skills down into incredibly small components and building them up. A lot of task analysis, some people may be familiar with that, just breaking skills down into small achievable steps. And then a lot of generalization opportunities. And I think sometimes this is the scary part. It's sometimes when it comes to finances, money, growing autonomy, we're targeting a particular skill. It's very easy to talk the talk, but the generalization component is getting out there. It's getting out into the world and using the skill that you've just learned in a really, really meaningful way. And this is where the shaping and the chaining and the task analysis is really beneficial, because if you can break something down into really small goals, and you hyper focus on one goal, and then you start to generalize it, where the person only has to engage in that one particular, or support to engage in that one particular skill they've just learned, and they begin to use it every day. It grows momentum. It increases likelihood of engagement, confidence for the service user, meaning then that you can start to build upon that skill and continue to grow it from there. We had we just created an overview of the goals for each group. So what was the ultimate goal for each group? So obviously it was understanding personal finances and planning their own activities and the associated financial costs. So the first step was we wanted people to explore activities and options using accessible tools. So some of our people in Group 1 were so used to people doing all these things for them that they didn't actually know there was an associated cost to choice making. So we sort of began to change that concept where we have a visual guide of everything we can offer or everything you like to do. We began to create a visual log of the costs associated with your choices and interests. So that was a real eye opener for some people. A very simple, nice, gentle goal to have, where people began to naturally see that every decision I make, most decisions I make will have some kind of financial relationship, financial implication, associated cost. Our other goal was making informed decisions. So this started to bring in other components of the ADM as well, which is always incredibly beneficial and very exciting to work on. So based on personal interests and available funds, we wanted to support people to begin to map out their informed decision making in relation to the funds that they have, but also being the driving force behind how they actually wanted to spend it. As opposed to services saying, well, we're doing A, B, and C, so would you like to partake? We began to generate personalized interest lists and showing the service users the funds that would match that, and then supporting them to match the money to the experiences that they wanted. Supporting people planning ahead for this group. So a group who were never given the opportunity to understand how the big stuff happens. We know for those that work in services, there's the day-to-day activities that we like to do, but then there's the big stuff. be it a trip where we're leaving the county or, wider trips. We recently supported somebody to save to leave the country, using this model of support. So that planning ahead concept, preparing, supporting a person to build an association between the big stuff in life and putting money aside. The other goal we wanted was independently managing their money. So I think for anybody that's has not been given the opportunity and where there's a lot of anxiety, this one became the kind of the critical focus for this group. Managing the before, the during, and the after of the activity. So carrying your own money, paying for your own items, receiving your change, receiving your receipts, putting them away, bringing them back. That independent process is incredible for building confidence. Then returning from an activity and updating a financial log, tracking your spending, learning about your decision making and the influences our decisions have on our bank balances. Then encouraging confidence, autonomy and ownership of the full financial process from planning right to follow up. So to achieve that, it was a lot. I think the driving force for me was to be able to create a curriculum that no matter where you entered, where you ended, you were upskilled. So this isn't about this skills building program was never about you need to do everything in order to be perceived as having financial autonomy. It was never about that. It was about empowerment at all levels. So where everybody came in at an entry level, if you develop 2 of the skills, 4 of the skills, 6 of the skills, all of the skills, it was still a path of financial growth, financial awareness, financial leading towards some element of better financial autonomy. And I think for anybody who's looking at this area, it's not about getting to the end. It's about supporting people to navigate opportunities to see if we provide in a specific way with the right amount of support, how far can they grow their financial autonomy? The first things we did, as I highlighted earlier, was just that expression of interest. Obviously, it's a rights-led process, so we want to make sure that the people were given the opportunity to express some form of interest. And obviously, there's choice, and then there's informed choice. I'm a big advocate of differentiating between those 2 experiences. So, and that's why our expression of interest was an informed one. We gave the easy reads, we showed people the resources, we did a little trial session for people who wanted to come along and see what we were doing. Some people supported in even making some of the materials and resources so they could see the process. And that created a true sense of informed choice making, as opposed to, I'm going to do this, would you like to come? There is an element of choice within it, but it's not always necessarily informed for some people. So the expression of interest is the fundamental starting point. And then obviously the assessment of skills. Where is the person at? In order to understand somebody's skill set, I think it was very beneficial to figure out what group people were in terms of where they were at, and how their financial skills have been shaped over the years. But the assessment of skills is a really important piece, because what we found is that when we sat with group 1, for example, we could identify that, some people actually had awareness of notes and coins. They were able to tell us, the kind of the quantities and things like that. However, when we then looked at the assessment in relation to everyday engagement with finances, we found that the people were, whilst they knew what a €20 note was, they could identify €50 note, €5 note. They were not able to do that within the community because there's so many other skills and so many other behaviors around that those people had never been given the opportunity to develop. So once we kind of sort of figured out the assessment of skills, we then moved on to breaking it down into very small bite-sized pieces. And I think the interesting thing probably for some of the staff was that we weren't starting off with identifying notes and coins and adding and subtracting, and that we were looking solely at the very basics, which was keeping your money safe. So we did a huge amount of work on that program, because what we wanted to do is we wanted to create obviously a set of practical skills, but we wanted to then run what we would call in the behavioral analytic community kind of generalization trials to make sure that the skills were that the person was able to utilize and tap into those skills in meaningful ways in the right places and spaces that they were going to find themselves in. So the keeping my money safe process looked at a vast number of areas, so right down to you know, where do you carry your money? Where do you put your money? Then we did trials if somebody asked you for your money, if somebody asked you for a loan, if you know, you had a coat pocket or you had an inside jacket pocket, which one would be your choice? Where do you think would be safest? We did a lot of we made specific resources and case scenarios for people to navigate through, but we also then did practice trials. We rented a room in a local EDI centre to facilitate the session because we needed more space. We then planned a trip, you know, and the trip was in the context of, you know, for the first time, people were going to carry their own money. And that's very anxiety inducing for this group because it's something that they hadn't experienced. So it's really important to start off at that basic level. There's no point in being in the community with a 50 € note if you're so nervous about it and you're so anxious you're going to lose it. So a lot of it was just about that concept of being confident about keeping your money safe. The next skill we looked at was using your money in store. And interestingly, during assessments, what we found is that the core 9 skills that you need in a shop, most of Group 1 actually didn't have. And not because, again, the capacity is absolutely there. It was just opportunity. So for those working in disability services, sometimes what you can find is that and we'll all find in our lives, in our own lives, it's not specific to disability, where somebody steps in and does it for you, you begin to tune out over time. So if I know in my personal life, somebody is going to willingly, you know, clean my house for me, I'm going to step back and not engage in that. And I'm going to become disconnected and despondent from that experience. So what I found during the assessment section is that using money in store, the people were not, because they'd never had to carry their money, they'd never had to do the engagement pieces. We found that they were disconnected from that opportunity and disconnected from that experience. So we had to do a lot of work around the 9 core steps to using money in store, and that is simple. It's really simple behavioral kind of things, like looking around the shop, choosing what you want, queuing for what you've decided to purchase, engaging at the checkout, taking out your money, handing over your money, taking back receipts and change, placing it back into its wallet and putting away in its safe space. So they're 9 really critical skills. So we actually did a lot of skills building in our teaching sessions before we even went out into the community, where we got people really confident around what are the 9 things you need to remember when we're out and about, when we go to the shop, and supporting them to develop those 9 core insights when out. And we use visual supports, and we use sequencing to support people to develop those skills. And like that, then it was the practice opportunity. So now I know how to keep my money safe, and now I know how to actually go through the necessary steps when in store. The skills too was really important for anyone that was struggling with anxiety, because this is quite overwhelming. They had not been given these opportunities before, the weight of responsibility, and that's why we took it at a very slow and safe pace. Obviously, being a behaviour analyst, there's a recording component for this, where we're monitoring people's engagement levels before we would move on to the next step. So the third step was supporting that group to understand that we need to ask for our receipts. Receipts are a piece of paper that fundamentally link us to where we have been, what we have chosen, and where our money has gone to, and that decision making has an impact on available funds. So whilst it seems like a very small skill to pull out in isolation, it linked itself into people beginning to understand the story of their money, so they could tell that story, and they could identify from looking back what they had spent their money on, So we support, once people began to ask for the receipt, put the receipt into the wallet, bring the receipt back, we introduced keeping an eye on my spending. So everyone got a small logbook and they would transfer their receipt information into that logbook. And they learned basic calculator skills. So I had €20, I spent X amount in this shop, as the receipt would tell me, and now this is my balance. So it created a sense of financial awareness, that every decision I make has a direct impact on how much I have left, which directly influences what I can do tomorrow and the next day, and so on and so forth. It took considerable work to work through that skill, but it was a fantastic. I think that was the big leap where we saw people beginning to look at their financial situation under a wider lens. We moved into skill 5, which was the role of money, so wants versus needs. Again, supporting people using visual aids within the curriculum to differentiate what is a want and what is a need, bringing in lots of role playing, bringing in lots of everyday items and objects and sorting them out, categorizing them, differentiating why is something a want, why is something a need. And that was actually a very enjoyable strand of the curriculum to work on. We then, skill 6 was looking at exploring my expenses. So we began to pull the information together that the service users have been learning to correlate. So when they went through their little logbooks, they were able to say, right, well, I'm going to analyze my spending under needs and wants, and I can see how much of my money is going towards things I want and how much of my money is going towards things that I actually need. And making sure that, we were supporting people to make decisions and understand the importance of addressing our needs and then moving into our wants. It was only until skill 7 that we started to look at notes and coins. Now, some people exited at this point where they were very content and happy with the skills they had achieved, and found that the notes and coins identification pieces were getting a little too complex or not where they wanted to be at that moment in time. So of this group, there was 5, and 2 people exited at this point, which were they completely supported to do, but still fully engaged in skills 1 to 6. The notes and coins is a vast number of skills around that. We sort of did recognizing coins, matching coins, sorting coins, selecting notes and coins from a wallet. So because there's so much around notes and coins in terms of learning, €20, €50. The challenges is when you're at a till and somebody says that's €25, so that the person would have the skills to navigate it from the pressure of somebody asking them for something, and then being able to root through and find those corresponding notes. We got into the more nitty-gritty once you hit skill 8, which is row counting, supporting people to be able to count 10s, 20s, 50s, and figuring out associations of how many 20-cent coins are in €1. That's all part of addition, and being able to understand how to add totals. We worked on matching items and cost. So where we would use visual supports to say we got some resources from shops and things like that. So the resources we had were indicative of how you see labeling in a supermarket. We used some online awareness as well, looking at online shopping, and supporting a person to see the cost and then look at their wallet and match the coins out, so they could learn the relationship between those two things. We moved on to adding and calculator skills, then making it more advanced, adding 2 plus totals. We then looked at income sources, income versus outgoings, and obviously we looked at that then in relation to needs and wants. And then we looked at banking and bank cards, the role of those institutions, what they do, how they support us, and how they aid us in understanding our finances and our banking. And then we moved into skill 14, which was future plans and savings. That was the core of that process. And just to give you an overview of one of the participants of the skills building program. So see, historically, this individual had a general understanding of money. Like, she knew that there was an exchange and receive aspect to it. She had a general understanding of notes and coins identification, could recognize most of coins and notes, would carry a small sum of money each day, but always sought staff support to keep it safe, usually never carrying any more than €10. Never had opportunities to plan activities in line with finances and cost, extremely anxious in shops and checkouts. We would have had a lot of behavioural expression of need in the community around cost of items, making mistakes, feeling under pressure to get it right, fear of losing money that she may have been carrying. So we were able to sort of progress on to at the end of, and this individual stayed for the all 14 steps of the curriculum. We found that we developed good understanding of money, notes and coins, identification, addition, and the use of calculators. Excellent knowledge of safety behaviours around finances, good planning skills, including associated cost, significant reduction in anxiety in shops and checkouts, independently carries money and pays for items. So Andrew's asked for the receipt now herself. Now alternates between using cash and has evolved to using bank card, owning her own Revolut. Knows her own PIN and keeps it private from everybody, including family members. And we've had no instance of behavioural expression of need in the last year relating to community situations around cost of items and making mistakes or feeling any sense of under pressure. So it's been a significant impact in terms of financial autonomy, quality of life, positive mental health, and a sense of self-belief. Hannah's actually come and asked for further support to evolve her skills further in this area. So we have started a financial skills building program 2. We're on the finer points of finalising that. We had our second group. So group 2 was our goals for group 2 is very, very different. So every Monday, our aim was that we would review a financial log sheet and plan the week's activities with costs using visual choice boards. We supported the person to match each choice activity to its cost using a picture guide and place the correct amount into a picture or text labeled plastic money wallet. Store all the wallets in a cash box and keep the key in a safe, accessible place that the individual has full access to. So straight away you'll see this is a completely different goal setting for this group, but I actually think of this group probably in terms of impact. The impact with this group was very significant. So before each activity, we also wanted the individual to take the matching wallet, put the money into a personal wallet and store it safely. The other goal was that at the activity, we would support the individual to pay with the money from their own wallet, collect the change and the receipt and return them to their own wallet. And then after returning home or to the day service, support the individual to update their log sheet to track their spending. If an activity is skipped by choice, we support the person to mark an X on the sheet and feel free to make a different choice. Very different curriculum, same basis, expression of interest, assessment of skills. But the first step was making informed choices around my weekly activities in the context of money. So for this group, it was just very, very simply providing visual choices, and each choice picture had an associated cost. And we supported the person to see the relationship between wanting something and money being required to achieve that. The second step was learning to support to take control of my own wallet. So these service users would not have had a wallet historically. So this was a new process for them. The third step was building independent financial transactions in the community. So Again, all of this work for this group was hands-on. It was direct. It was every single day, engaging in these practical skills. So they were supported to build their financial independent transactions in the community, take out their own wallet, hand over their own money, take the change, put the receipt in, and then tracking and logging spending in everyday contexts. So just to quickly show you, for a participant who was part of group 2, we had financial planning was done without participation historically. Activities with a direct cost were limited in line with available funds, but did not always align with the individual's will and preference. So we see again, by looking at finances, we're also tapping into other aspects of the Assisted Decision Making Act and human rights. The person's finances were locked away. There is a direct violation of her human rights. Behavioural expression of need occurred weekly due to frustrations around wanting to do more cost-related activities, but she had never been given the opportunity to understand that there's a direct correlation between how much you have and what you can do. And now we have gentle staff support. She plans her own activities for the week using visual choice boards and the associated cost board. She understands there are an associated cost to activities, and she plans in line with the available funds. Changes her mind and makes new plans regularly. Tracks her spending every day. You can see where her money is going. She can see the volume going down. Has full access to her finance cash box, and she stores and minds her own key. Has learned to use and carry her own wallet. No incidents of behavioural expression of need in relation to finances in the last 9 months. And there's just a really quick, because I think sometimes pictures can explain things a lot more effectively. There's an individual who has gone from having no engagement with her finances being invisible, something that is a conversation that were never had, things that she never saw. So you see in what you'll see basically in those array of pictures is supporting. She's got a visual board, just slightly in the first picture to the left. She has made some nice choices about what she'd like to do for the week. She can see that there's a financial cost. All her money is out. That is her money. It's her finances exactly as she has available to her. She has full control over it, full autonomy over it. The small wallets have pictures on them to match the activities she has chosen, and they also have matched the amount of money needed to achieve that activity. So if it's swimming, massages, facials, whatever's rocking her world at that moment in time. And she's supported then to match that money out. And you can see that she's picking it up and she's matching it to the wallet, to the activity, and to the amount that she's shown that she needs. She's full control over putting that in. She puts it into her cash box. As I said, she has her own key. She supports her own finances. And she puts that money away. Then when she's going out into the community, she'll go back to her cash box, find the matching activity. So if it's swimming, time to go swimming, we'll take that out and transfer that money directly then into her own wallet. She will carry the wallet herself. She will pay for things herself. She'll take her change, take the receipt, and it's just such a significant change for somebody who didn't know that money existed before at this point in time. Just super towards the end, just these are the sample resources I was talking about. There's nothing here that's mind-blowing, but for people who have never had the opportunity to see finances and the relationship between activity, these kind of things can make such a difference if you use them every single day. So in this instance, this is where we started with some people, just the activity, the associated cost, supporting them to look at their finances, match the 20, match the 10, put it into their own wallet that they are now using, and support them to put it into the bag or somewhere safe. And doing that every day for the core financial activities helps the person build an association between activity and cost. And looking at their own money builds an association between how much I have and the impact that my choices have on how much I have left. They're all critical concepts in understanding money. You'll see a wider example then where we're able to evolve it, where you've got a list of the activities the person likes to do. They're supported to see how much those activities cost, and they're supported to then match out. So where it's cafe and it's €8 that the person might need, they're going to look at their money and they're going to match out. Well, I can match 5 to 5 and put it in, a €2 coin, a €1 coin, and I can store that money safely. And then when I'm going out, I can then access that money safely and put it in my wallet. Now, absolutely, there's restrictions within this. This is not how I have access to my money. But again, it's just reminding that this is category 2, the group that we discovered who just had no opportunities or sense of awareness around money at all. So it's a huge step. Is it everything? Absolutely not, but it's absolutely fundamentally a step in the right direction. There's more advanced forms for some people where they're planning their choices and the money that they need. And this is a very interesting process for one of the participants, because what happened was he got really good at this, really, really good. Every Monday coming in, adding up how much he had using a calculator, writing out his choices, how much it was going to cost. So much so he got so good at it that we encountered a real challenge where we had no idea where the money was going. It was just disappearing rapidly. We didn't know money was putting money in, taking money out, and it got very difficult as a registered HIQA provider to be able to say that we are supporting this person and we understand where his money was going, because sometimes we really didn't. So he was supported then to move to the second template where he could do whatever he wanted. He just had to tick if he'd put money in or he was putting money out. And that made a huge skill progression and allowed him to track his finances out. And we're getting to the point where the cash box concept that is embedded in so many services will be faded out for him also. And then it's just an example of the daily log that our group one were using, where they were just tracking out the date, what they had available to them in funds, what they had spent in that day, what was left in their wallet, and was there enough left for the future plan? So what were you planning tomorrow, and have you got enough left to make those plans? And that financial accountability piece has been huge for a couple of the participants, where it has really helped them to understand the wider concept of finances, that it's so heavily influenced. Our choices are so heavily influenced by what we have left. And then what we started to see was different choice making and more informed choice making, where people were saying, well, I actually won't do that this week because I want to save to add my money together so I can do this the following week. So it really evolved people's decision making as well. So it had a direct impact on that as well. I think for me, it's just always remembering that progress is not about perfection. It's about choosing to try one small step at a time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nicola. That was so informative. And I know a lot of us in the services and practitioners, we've struggled from that, as you say, that traditional historical way of working into new ways with a human rights lens. And I think what you've done here is you've shown us a human rights approach in action. So you've actually broken that down for us and given us some really great information going forward. I particularly will take away the not if, but how. And it reminds me so much of the Making Safeguarding Personal approach and toolkit that we've been involved in the National Safeguarding Office, where we talk about whose safeguarding is it anyway. It should really be done at least in partnership, if not being led by the person whose safeguarding it is. So this has been music to my ears, and I thank you so much for the great work. Before we go to our panel discussion, and we've got loads of questions coming in, I'm really grateful to you all for sending in your questions, but I'd like to play a really short video. I'm going to ask my colleague Colleen if she can play a short video from Leah Connolly from the Brothers of Charity, who with her kind permission has asked, has allowed us to play this here today. And it just explains how to go about opening a bank account if nobody has done it before. Thanks, Colleen.
Hi, my name is Leah Connolly, and this is my story. I had a goal to become financially independent. I would collect my money at the post office once a week. I would go home, give it to my family. I would put it into like a purse or a bag or like a locker, and I would take it out and say, I would take like 20, and then if I needed it, I'd go back for it. I made the choice and decided it would be time for me to have my own bank account. So I did this with the support of my family and key workers. I thought it time to take it into my own hands and become a young adult and take the responsibility on my own money.
Leah, so we've just had your personal outcome meeting. How do you feel it went?
Good.
Yeah, I think it was great. Granny was really supportive of your idea of becoming financially independent.
He was.
Yeah. Are you excited to start this goal?
Yeah. I had to choose a bank account that was most successful for me. So we went in with my key worker and we asked them for information. We were asking what the best way to do it was. And they said to do it online if I want to get it sooner and later. They told my key worker that I needed a passport and a letter of address to open a bank account online. The next step was to download the AIB bank app on my phone.
Okay, Leah, let's start by doing my money program and see what we need to do to open a bank account.
Yep.
Here it is. To open a bank account, you will need proof of your identity. That means like a passport and proof of your address, so where you live. Can you bring them all in?
Yeah, I can do. You can get
Brilliant.
them.
Brilliant. And we will go online then through your phone.
Okay.
And we'll talk to someone from the bank and we'll have to show them your passport and your address to show it's you opening the bank account.
Yep.
Okay, let's get started.
Let's get started. Thank you. Have a nice day. Thank you. The thing I found hard was the communication issues. Can you repeat that, please? I had to be in the room on my own and trying to understand the other person on the phone. I had to me and my passport on the phone at the same time. This was to prove it was me. I had to be in a good room with lighting and space. And now have the responsibility of my own money. I had support in my family and key worker, people of charity. I think the bank, mainly the bank and the people within the bank, all those things helped me open up my bank account. My next step was to move my money from the post office to my bank account. I'm so glad I have decided to make the choice to open up my own bank account and to take full responsibility for my own money and spending it the way I want to. On your face, smile. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope I encourage you to open your own bank account. On the other side, there's a bright blue sky. So leave all the dark gray clouds all behind. Just take your time, 'cause life's not a race. Just try to put a smile on your face. Smile. Ooh, smile.
Well, I think that's put a smile on all our faces this morning. So thank you to Leah and the Brothers of Charity. So this leaves us to, if I can welcome our speakers back on. So Joanne, Aileen and Nicola, and also invite Joanne Haffey from, as I said, the National Office for Human Rights and Equality, who is going to join our panel discussion. Tim Hanley, our General Manager in the NSO, is going to feed us some questions. But Joanne Haffey, I would just like to ask you for some of your reflections on what you've heard this morning.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks very much, Sarah, and thanks for inviting me onto the webinar this morning. Thanks to Joanne, Aileen and Nicola. They were great presentations, and I suppose a particular thanks to Leah for sharing her story. I just really love that scene of her outside Brown Thomas's with arms full of bags. I suppose that's a goal for all of us, really. So good on you, Leah. I suppose I have a couple of reflections, if it's okay for me to go through them. Joanne Condon, thanks so much for your presentation, and a couple of things that I've picked up on. You know, every person with a disability, every person has a right to participate as a full citizen. And in order to do this, you have to have financial autonomy. And that's really core, and it's really important. And that ties in with the principles of the Assisted Decision Making Act. And they're core to how we support individuals to achieve financial independence. And I suppose sometimes when we think about the ADM Act, we automatically go and think about the arrangements that are there for people. And we think, well, how can we use those arrangements to support people? When in actual fact, we need to go back to the beginning, which is the key principles of the Act, which are what Joanne mentioned, and everybody actually mentioned this morning: presuming capacity, understanding what the person's will and preference is, and really importantly, which all the speakers have spoken about, is building a person's capacity before sending people or suggesting that people or a person should go down the road of an arrangement under the Act. And that's one of my sort of takeaways, that's really important, but it's also a message that I'd really like to promote this morning, that the principles of the Act are legislation too, not just the arrangements of the Act. And its organisations obviously have a responsibility around building capacity for people, and I think the banking sector carries that responsibility as much as any other sector does, or any other services that support people. And thanks to Aileen, you know, for your presentation and owning that. And that's really positive to hear. Overall, you know, the thing that came through is that there's just an enormous cultural change that's required, and that's always huge for all organisations, and this is a big change. And you know, the Act brings in lots of cultural changes that will take time to cascade and filter down through services, and it takes education and support for staff as well as for people who we're serving. Nicola, thanks very much for your presentation as well. I suppose you outlined a very comprehensive capacity building programme for people to access their money. And I was really, one of the things that I was kind of taken with was the fact that that's very complex, you know, helping people build their capacity, but you've gone the distance with that. And you've also spoken about, you know, there is a complexity in the learning environment. You know, people can build skills in the learning environment, but they have to be able to transfer that into the real life environment. So how we support people's capacity has to be meaningful, and it has to be real. And you also hit on a very important point, which is that assisted decision making is very much aligned with positive risk taking rather than risk management. And it comes back again to us, all services and all sectors, considering how do we do that? You know, how do we support this positive risk taking that we talk about? And for me, it's around the education that you spoke of, Nicola, but it's also not just for service users or the people that we support. It's really going back to the staff training piece and building staff's confidence, because as you said, people get really nervous and very anxious around people's finances, and particularly protecting people's finances. And you know, how do we get past that? And as I see it, the only way we really get past that is to support staff to have a more diverse and dynamic approach in supporting the people that they work with. And one of the things that you said, Nicola, that really stood out for me was we need to move away from this all or nothing approach and just become more dynamic and more flexible and adaptive. And the principles of the ADM Act are what support us to do that. Aileen, I've noticed that a lot of the commentary in the comments is towards you, so you might be under a bit of pressure this morning. So, but look, well done. It's great. It's great to hear from the bank. It's great to hear from the banking sector. It's so positive to know that this is on your agenda, that you realise that there are difficulties. There's always been difficulties in people being able to achieve financial autonomy if they have particular disabilities or they have particular needs. And that's come, I suppose the light has been shone very specifically on that with the Assisted Decision Making Act. And so thank you, for looking at that and taking more of an in-depth examination of it. I think as well, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I'm so sorry. I thought you'd finished. Sorry, Joanne.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely fine. No, I can leave it at that actually, because there'll be more questions and more discussion and I can come in.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Joanne. So I'll actually ask Tim Hanley, General Manager of the NSO, to come in and just give us some of the questions. We've got another 30 minutes. It'll bring us up to around 25 past, where we will then do our closing reflection. So thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks to everybody who's participated, Leah, Joanne, both Joanne's, Aileen, Nicola, and for Sarah's doing such an excellent job there. Myself and Colleen have been busy here monitoring the questions, and thanks to everybody. We've had over 560 people on the webinar this morning, which just shows you the relevance, the importance and the timeliness of this issue. So I'm actually going to ask a bit like who wants to be a millionaire.